Welcome to the Grief Dreams podcast, where we have conversations with guests about their life, loss, grief, and of course, grief dreams, which can be dreams of the deceased. If you want to know more about the topic and your host, please visit the website griefdreams.ca. To support the podcast, please go ahead and rate it. For additional ways to support the show, please see the episode show notes. Before I move on with the show, I would like to give a territory acknowledgement. Long before Canada was formed, the Stalo people were the original land stewards, and they have lived here since time immemorial. They continue to live in the unceded Stalo territory known to settlers as the Fraser Valley and Lower Fraser Canyon of British Columbia. I recognize and honor the contribution that Indigenous peoples have made and continue to make to our community and the topic of grief dreams. Welcome to the Grief Dreams podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in again. And today we have two people on the podcast, Michael and Luke. And so I'll introduce them both right now. So Michael Mackenzie has worked in developmental services, supporting people with intellectual disabilities for more than 35 years. His areas of focus have included person-directed employment navigation, fundraising, staff training, advocacy and rights, decision-making and healthcare, palliative and hospice family support, and legacy work through storytelling. He is a former board member of the Down Syndrome Association of Toronto. Although he does not come to grief and loss from a clinical or academic perspective, he offers information and insights from firsthand experience. He navigates people with developmental disabilities, their direct support workers, and their families through the hard conversations using a respectful living well approach that supports them to be actively involved in discussions about their course of care, including personal choices and details around last wishes and memorials. Michael is also a volunteer at Bereaved Families of Ontario in Toronto, where he facilitates peer grief groups for people with intellectual disabilities and another series for direct support workers who have experienced loss of those they have supported. And joining him, a gentleman Michael has worked with, Luke Lapas. And so Luke went to Brighton Launch, which spiked his interest working with people. And over the last 3 years, Luke has split his time working at a daycare with children who have Down syndrome, as well as a couple days a week working at one of Toronto's senior homes. Luke has co-facilitated with Michael a grief group with people who have intellectual disabilities. So thank you both for being here today. I'm really looking forward to talking about this subject and the amazing work that you guys are doing when it comes to support with people who have intellectual disabilities.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So, Michael, I'm going to direct a question towards you first. How did this all start? Was there an ask that came about in the sense of starting a grief group, or was one already in place and you kind of like just took over and added to it?
I think there was definitely an ask, and there was definitely a need. Prior to where I'm working now, which is called Montage Support Services, I was part of, and still am part of, an organization called L'Arche. And through L'Arche Toronto, which is where I spent my formative years with the Developmental Services, they actually did have a grief group that had started from an interest with one of the retired assistants there called Jane Powell. And she developed a whole lot of resources that really gave people with disabilities an opportunity to talk amongst themselves as their parents were aging and as they were seeing the loss of the people that they lived with and their families. So it sort of went for many, many years. That stemmed into having presentations within the developmental sector. And so I, through my work, having supported people with Down syndrome and on the autism spectrum, and been with them sometimes at the moment of death, and also certainly walking with them through their illness or their last days, created an interest in me to further that. So it sort of sat dormant for a while. And then through volunteering at Kensington Hospice for a number of years, for 10 years, I would often get called in to support people and families with intellectual disabilities, which led to a connection with Bereaved Families of Ontario, and recognizing that there wasn't anything formal for that, even though they were getting calls from families who had either a loved one with a disability or there was a loss happening in their family and they weren't sure how to have a conversation with their loved one with a disability.
I think it's so important because I used to work as a support worker, and that's one of the things I noticed, how people who have intellectual disabilities, they definitely disenfranchised in the grief support around them and the policies that are around them. And so when I heard that you're doing this grief group, I think it's just amazing. And you too, Luke, think it's so beautiful that we're trying to fill some of those gaps because there's definitely a need to be able to express our grief. And so how did you guys get connected, Michael? How did you find Luke and start this program?
Well, I connected with Luke through my previous role at Montage, which was employment supports. So finding out the things that he was genuinely interested in, and finding the things that he needed to take to meet those qualifications and the criteria that was required for his chosen career path. So that's why right now he's working with children and seniors, because he's not sure which one he really wants to focus on. But as far as the talking about grief is, one of the things that I do with the people that I'm supporting in the employment stream was really getting to know them. And part of that is the people giving me a tour of their world and their home. And one of the things that I noticed on Luke's wall was he had a nice, very respectful collection of memorial, the programs from memorials and funerals of families and friends that he'd been to. And it was just sort of stuck on his wall in a really nice way. So I observed that, noted it, and then, a year passes, and then I get more involved in doing the grief work with BFO. And the thing that intrigued me about Luke was he just presented his loss in a matter of fact kind of way, and really respectful of the storytelling of the people that he'd lost. And
Yeah.
when I was putting together the grief group specifically for people with IDD, I recognized, a lot of people with intellectual disabilities in many situations are perceived as they don't understand what's going on. So we don't want to share the bad news with them. And then understanding that people with disabilities have many, many layers of loss, including staff changes, changes of locations. These long-term staff come and then all of a sudden they're gone. And there's very rarely the ritual of saying goodbye. It just sort of happens. And then with the loss within their families, stuff happens and they find out last minute or they're not told at all. So getting with organizations to inform them and build their capacity around, yes, people have the capacity to understand. It's just we need to learn their way of communicating and what their understanding of death and grief is, and then go from there. So when I did the first grief group, I thought it'd be really, really good to have somebody who's have lived experience to facilitate it with me. So that's why I invited Luke. And Luke, maybe you want to say a little bit more about how it was to co-facilitate with me the 12 different agencies that joined us. Again, it was online because it was just after COVID.
Yeah. So during the grief group, I was able to share my experiences with other people of how I dealt with loss. I've lost family members in my life. There was my grandfather from my dad's side who passed away in 2011, and even more recently my grandfather from my mom's side who passed away back in 2020, but not from COVID. They they too were sharing experiences how they've dealt with loss and how to cope with, well, not necessarily deal or accept the loss, but rather cope with it in a way that's, I don't know, I guess you could say maybe comforting for them, I guess, or you go to bed and have dreams about certain people.
We had brought that up at it's sort of a 5-week series, and we talk about dreams as part of the process, because I find that people with intellectual disabilities really like to create their own story about what their experience. So
Hmm.
in the 3 sessions, the 3 5-week sessions that we've done, Luke was with me for the first one. They really latched onto the journey, and using visuals around what a fence looks like as an obstacle, a waterfall, what's happening under the stream where it's calm, the flowing water is the rush of emotions. They get these images, and the conversation it brings is really, the insights are incredible. They're just really incredible. And when we had the conversation with them about dreams, or Luke raised the question to the group about dreams, they would often say that they dream about the person as they were, and
Hmm.
that dreams are happening in places that they used to go on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And they talk about the same things. No one has really ever said that there's been a message in their dreams, but what was a word that they used when they were describing how it was familiar, the dreams, Luke, that they were meeting at Tim Hortons, even something that was relative to their world.
Yeah, I'm reading at a Tim Hortons restaurant. Yeah, I think I remember we talked a little bit about that. Yeah.
Yeah. And a number of the people just said it just felt like home, or felt like the way it was.
Exactly. I know that feeling very well.
I know in a lot of people's situations, they say, the person that they supported or they dreamt about who previously had a disability doesn't use the wheelchair anymore and speaks clearly and things like that. I don't discount that, but I did note that with the people that we were talking to, it was the people appeared in the dreams as they knew them. It wasn't,
Exactly.
yeah, I was really interested to hear that because my own experience with dreams of people I supported, and as I say, when work delves into your personal dream life, it becomes, you notice the first time. So my first significant dream was about 20 years ago with a
Mm-hmm.
man I supported, and his name was Gordon, and he had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So he was
Non what?
non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It's a type of cancer.
Oh, it's a type of cancer.
And he was depleting and going downhill fairly quickly. And prior to him passing away, I had a dream. And in the dream, he said to me, "Take me to the Museum of Knowledge." And I woke up at that, that was what he said. And I woke up startling. So, of course, the next day I went to his home. "Gordon, where do you want to take me?" And Gordon was a man of few words, so I got Diet Coke and ice cream. Not the Museum of Knowledge that I had, this insight or whatever. But for whatever reason, that message has stuck with me. So whenever it comes up or there's anything related to that, maybe that's what he meant. Maybe that's what he meant. So that was my first insight dream. And then there's three significant people in my life that I've worked with who all have Down syndrome. And I'm very much a believer in strings and how people's lives overlap, and they were meant to be there. So bear with me for this story, but it's really set the tone and informed my values and the core values around how I do my work. And I've now been 40 years in this field. So Gordon had passed away, and we were looking to fill his spot because obviously in developmental services, as soon as a room becomes available, there's that pressure. So as part of the process to welcome somebody new, I went to Huronia Regional Center and met Tim. So Tim and Gordon never met. They've never met at all. But what was interesting to me, and as I took it as a sign, there was a birthday card on Tim's dresser. And January 7th was the day that Gordon had passed away. So it's like, oh, that's a sign that Gordon is welcoming Tim. So that just the subtle nuances that go in your head as you're thinking. The thing that they had in common is that both men had come from institutions. So Gordon had come from Edgar and Tim had come from Huronia Regional Institute. There was one really interesting situation that happened. Gordon used to go to a day program called Pegasus. And so Gordon had been gone for a couple of years, and Tim happened to be a fit for this day program. So the day that I brought Tim to the day program for the first time, Tim ran ahead of me. So there's a hallway and series of rooms where the programs were. He ran into the day program, and the first thing that came out of Alistair, which was another participant in the day program, he didn't see me because I'm still in the hallway. And I overhear Alistair saying, "Gordon is back." They don't even look alike. But it was just, oh, that's another sign that it's okay. So fast forward many, many years, Tim showed early signs of Alzheimer's and dementia, and it was progressed really quickly. But he actually died on Gordon's birthday. So it was like just this whole thing. So following Tim's death, I started to have dreams about the three of us, and we would have just conversations, nothing enlightening or anything like that, but just the three of us were then together. So for many, many years, because of that point of connection, I've really named them as I named them as my guardian angels. And so even sort of we've talked about things in the dreams and just sort of passing the time, and it's just really comfortable. So I really name them as my guardian angels. And so it's been 15 years since Tim passed away. But another
Wait,
situation
15
happened.
years you said? 15?
Passed away 15 years
Oh
ago.
my
So you just
goodness.
go on, and I mean, their pictures are with me all the time. They're in my kitchen. I've got them a part of my screensaver, and just feel really connected. And that they've driven me to do the grief work with people with IDD and supporting families. So it's just there, right? But the funniest thing that just happened now is that another gentleman that I'm working with Down syndrome, his birthday is the day that Tim died. So it's like this cycle starting again. So that's just the fact that they didn't know each other. First question that Gordon asked me was, take me to the Museum of Knowledge. And it's like, what does that mean? What does that mean to me? How do I interpret that? Will it be something that I will find answers to in the years later, which in some ways I have? That question has informed me in directions that I've gone and conversations that I've become a part of, as well as how I support people and their families. But just the fact that it's been 15 years and it's like, oh, this is starting again. Not seeking that, but whoa, another tie that binds.
That's awesome. And I think it's amazing that, well, you shared a lot, right? So there's a couple things I want to sort of talk about. But first is the support workers' grief. And I think that's just also disenfranchised. And I'm glad that you're bringing that up. And you also support people with their own grief when that happens. But I think it's so interesting with the dreams that you have and how they connect us, and how dreams in general can provide us these windows of curiosity of life. You said the Museum of Knowledge. Like, what is that? What does that mean? And you're trying to make sense of it, which allows you to just think and reflect a little differently with the people that you're walking with, and also with those that came that you served over that time. And I think that's just a wonderful aspect of dreams. And so I appreciate you sharing the story and how they are such a big part of your life moving forward. And I think a lot of people forget how important those that we support and serve, what they mean to us. And I think it's important that we provide support for them when those people do die. And I want to go back actually to the support group that you did together, and also just what grief looked like. So for Luke, I want to bring you into the conversation, and I'm really curious to see what grief looked like for you. I know there was mention of a memorial wall where you had some pictures and stuff. I wonder if you could take us back. You said you had your grandfather's die, but what do you see when you think of grief on your own journey? So what happened when it came to your own grief journey?
Well, that's an interesting question that you asked there, because, yeah, I know that, yeah, grief is a really difficult thing to deal with. Yeah, when both of them passed, like, just but on different years, I once had these dreams. Like, one of the dreams was like, well, when my grandfather from my dad's side passed away, after that, I had this dream that, because when he was skiing with me, because he was an athlete just like my dad and myself are. And we were skiing with each other on different ski hills. And when the time came, and then years later, after when he started developing illnesses and didn't ski anymore, he watched me from one of the ski lodges, just going downhill on all these different ski hills. So yeah, basically, and also, yeah, that's one of the dreams and about him. And another dream is, I also had these dreams that, I was swimming in the lake at my cottage, and he watched me from afar because he loved swimming as well. And he told me to keep up the good work and everything like that. And now I want to move on to my other grandfather, my mom's dad, who passed away just recently, like 5 years ago. He was a big Raptors fan. Guess what? Fun fact, both of them, in fact, all of my grandparents, if you look at my family tree history, they're all from Lithuania. Uh, yeah, I remember them sharing them stories about Lithuania. And you know what? My grandfather, my mom's dad, loved walks to the park. Mind you, my dad's father also loved walks to the park too. That's another dream I had about him. And did I also mention that one of my grandfathers was also a Raptors fan? Toronto Raptors basketball.
I love the Raptors too. And I was really excited when they won the
Oh
championship.
my goodness, he was still alive to see it. That was just a year before he passed. And I was like, whoa, they won the NBA. I was like,
Who would have
that
thought?
was such that was such a close game. Just like, we were just like 4 points like apart from the Warriors. Our score was 114 and theirs was 110. Oh, and another thing. My grandfather, my mom's dad, also loved children himself. So he actually met my grandmother, my mom's mom, at a scout camp. I think in Quebec, because I think they already immigrated from Lithuania to Quebec. I think. By the way, Quebec is where my mom's originally from, and my my maternal grandparents' second home.
Yeah, I like how you're having said so many dreams, and it's like it seems to be so common. And I'm glad you put it in the support group to talk about because this is a
Mhm.
way that we can remain connected, with those who have died and to remember them in our own unique ways. And so I'm curious, Luke. I know you're supporting like the group. What kind of
Uh-huh.
support did you have before this group? Because like I know you're supporting other people, but just in your own journey, like who have supported you in your grief?
Oh, I've had like friends, family members, teachers, caregivers. I've had like all different kinds of people. Oh, and I want to add another person. It was actually an old friend of mine from the school I went to before Brighton Launch. It was a special education school called Merle Levine Academy, now closed due to lack of students, unfortunately. Anyways, it was actually an old friend. Her name, yeah, unfortunately, this friend passed away at a really young age. Just not even, I don't think she was even 13 yet, but her name was Eden, Eden. She was an old schoolmate of mine. We played all different kinds of board games. We hung out at recess together. And I once had a dream about her. When I found out from all the teachers that she passed away, I had this dream in my mind saying, "Hey, Luke, do you want to play some games with me and my big brother?" Because she had an older brother. Or do you want to play this game with me at recess? Or I there and then as time went on, the staff actually posted a picture of her in the main hall to remember, and it's a picture of her dressed up as an angel for Halloween. You know,
Oh,
I sometimes look at her as a guardian angel too.
it's interesting what you say, Luke, about pictures, because one of the topics that the group generally comes to is sharing photographs of the people that they've lost. I'm currently doing a grief group with community living in Essex, and two of the people within that circle passed away within a month. And so
Hmm.
that's why we were specifically asked to do that group. So sharing the photographs of the people that were lost, and they reminded me of the Mexican animated movie where it was the Mexican
That
grandfather who passed away. What's that called? Encanto?
wait a minute, wait a minute, are you talking about there was I think was it Coco
Coco, yes.
or
And
no or no was that his grandmother? I think or maybe that was his grandfather or grandmother.
it was definitely one of the older relatives, but what they reminded me of, one gentleman in the group reminded me that it's so important to hold pictures and actually say the names of people who we lost, because if we don't say their names when we're telling stories, then their names get lost in our memory or they don't keep them alive. And the same with the photographs that fade when we don't bring them up. So I do that in my other groups that I facilitate as well, because with the direct supporters, when they are the direct support staff, when they're sharing stories, they don't say the names. And even in the mainstream grief groups, I really encourage say the name of the person that you lost. And the tone of how stories are shared changes when people are smiling about the stories, because the grief stories are so important as a starting ground. But by the end of the 6 weeks, the people with the intellectual disabilities, there's a tone of joy in them, and that they're able to continue supporting each other after the group finishes.
I like that. And I want to go back to also just the structure of the group. So how do you structure it? Is it like there's a topic you are going to talk about, or is it more free flowing? Like how does the group look? What does the group look like?
So the
Uh-huh.
grief groups that Bereaved Families of Toronto runs are structured. The facilitators are also volunteers, because if it's spouses, for example, there's a spouse group, there's friends group, there's different types of groups. So you already know that the point of connection between the participants is that loss. So with the IDD group, there is a loose conversation. So we start talking about their experience of different types of losses. In, for example, losing a pet, grieving when their siblings go off to university and they're still at home, or if a sibling is learning to drive and they can't do that. So that's a loss. And so people understanding that. Then we talk about pets possibly, and then get into actual the loss of people. And then we talk about if the next week might be their involvement in the memorial. What were they told? Because people sometimes they're upset that nobody told me that grandma was sick, and then they didn't let me go to the funeral. That's a safe place for them to say that. So they'll talk about their memorial story, what part in the memorial they played. Then we talk about the different stuff, cremation and burial and traditional things like that around their culture. We get in a lot around emotions. And as one of the tools that I use with the group is very visual. So for the group that I'm currently doing now, it's a storytelling. So we've been on a journey and then having obstacles of fences, a waterfall that evokes emotions and the calm water, not knowing what's going to happen a little bit later, people you meet on the journey. Like I always use the analogy for the people with IDD that right now, like grief is your own journey. But for right now, for these 6 weeks, we're walking our journey with the same people. And then after the 6 weeks, we're going to go off into our separate directions. Sometimes you might meet people who are on their way back and they're telling you what grief should be, but we don't really want to hear because we want to experience it ourselves. And there might be people behind us who are wanting to know what's it like, and recognizing that you can't experience it. You can experience it differently, and that for short periods, there might be people who are walking with you. And it's surprising how they get it and add to the story. So it's a building story by the end of the 5 weeks.
I like that. It's really interesting for me. And I know that's something I've seen too with the individuals not being able to attend or even know that a person has died. Like there's this resistance even from the organization to not say anything. I remember when I was working, what we were told, because two people in the home that I was supporting had a loss of their father. And the policy was if they bring it up, change the subject, don't talk about it. And it's like, but they want to talk about it. They want to maybe go visit a memorial site of some sort, but there wasn't really any kind of, I think, grief literacy from the organization to the staff on like how to actually process the grief. And then that grief can, I think if you don't talk about it, it kind of goes into behaviors and like anger and other things, which, like then.
I know the feeling. I know that feeling.
And so I think it's so important to be able to express and explore the grief with them, because then you're allowing them to be able to understand their emotions a little differently and to feel heard and seen, which is, people understand when they're not. And I learned that, quickly. And so I think it's great that you are opening the doors to be able to talk about this and the importance of it. And I think it doesn't have to be, as you said, it can be, you can do it in a safe way. And that seems like what you're doing.
Even with the direct support workers grief group, they're very much of the mindset, if somebody passes away that they've been supporting, they have to go back to work the next day and it's business as usual. And we have to get the room ready for somebody who's next and things like that. And for them to go through it as well as a team and as well as their own individual grief journey. Because a lot of times for newer staff, this is the first time that somebody's passed away, maybe not even in their family, because a lot of startup staff are in their early 20s. And then they're moving into a home with older people that they're supporting. And so there hasn't been a lot of opportunity for them to share what they're feeling on their own, as well as how the group dynamics is shifting. I also really find value in learning about how different populations are handling grief or what their thoughts are. In addition to your podcast, I've been currently listening to one called the Telepathy Tapes. And it's particularly talks about telepathy within the non-speaking neurodiverse community. And it's a 10 or 12 hour series. And this past week, talking about the Museum of Knowledge, I had to sort of play it back. This one thing is, there was one gentleman in this circle of neurodiverse people who communicated with telepathy. And so this whole series is around how that happens and how it's happening in different countries. And that people will speak beyond the walls of their home to other people, ESP or however, to other people who are nonverbal. And in the last episode, one of the things that one of the people on the autism spectrum said, who used typing as a way of communication as well as telepathy, said something about going to the library of information. It's like, what? So it's like, did they just say that? And again, this is over 15 years later from that initial message from Gordon, but it's like somebody else is saying the importance of going to the library of information. So I've been spending many nights since last week thinking about this and what it means. And I think that the biggest message is that what Gordon was giving me is just keep finding out about what you need to know around, and specifically around people with disabilities, that being open to how they communicate. Because I always like this analogy that people who didn't speak in real life have found their voice in the dream world, or in the living world, that there is this whole network of people who are neurodiverse and limited speaking, that they can communicate telepathically and that they have the same wishes and desires as we do to make a difference in the world. And so, of course, I've been going up to everybody I know who is nonverbal and saying, where do you meet other people and where do you connect? And hoping that they'll say the Hill, which is the point of connection for this group. But it just, the jewels of wisdom that you get from listening to people. And just though you, Luke, and I were leading into this conversation today, and literally 3 days ago, I hear another iteration of Take Me to the Museum of Knowledge, where they're saying the Library of Information.
Library of Information.
Joshua, Luke has, when we were talking about strings and connecting people, Luke, you told me about a book.
That's right. Yeah, I'm going to bring those books. I'll be right back.
Yeah, Luke was really amazing on the facilitating group. I had another gentleman with us who I've known for many years who has Down syndrome, and he was part of the group. It's really interesting how he's used his grief. So this gentleman named Andreas, I have his permission to use his story, but his mother died when he was early teens, and his father ended up going back to Germany, I think, or the country where they had been from. So he was kind of left on his own to handle his grief, and he really got lost in it. But then he started writing stories about his relationship with his mother and their stories together, which evolved into him writing a short story about her, which evolved into him wanting to write a musical about his grief, about this gentleman handling the grief of his loss of his mother. So last year, he had a full orchestra, had an ASL interpreter, a sold out theater, and they performed the dry run of the script, and it's still in development to become a musical. So for him, sharing his grief around that was incredible. Sorry, Luke, do you want to say more about those books? I was just finishing a story with Joshua.
That's okay. I'm so sorry. So here we have Invisible String by Patrice Karst, illustrated by Joanne Lou Verithoff. I don't know how you pronounce it. It's called Invisible String. And This is a book. The story is about it's about a mom that tells her two children that they're all connected. This mother has two children that they're all connected by an invisible string, and the children insist that it's impossible, but still they want to learn more. What kind of string? The answer is the simple truth that binds us all. It's an invisible string made of love, even though you can't really see it. You can feel it deep in your heart and know that you're always connected to the ones you love. This joyful contemporary classic for all ages has helped comfort and heal countless readers by easing separation anxiety, loneliness, and loss, while also exploring the intangible yet unbreakable connections between us all. Love, or any kind of connection that you've had, even though you can't really physically see it, especially with your loved ones not around anymore, it's kind of like an invisible string.
And that's great that it really spoke to you, Luke. I think it's important that we find those books and those things that speak to everyone, and everyone's going to have a different need and what's going to connect with them. So that's great that story has done that. And so I'm really curious, as we just move forward, is there anything else you want to say before we hit the last question?
Well, just tell them that, the people that you love, no matter where you are still there. And, even though your loved ones are not around anymore, they're still here somewhere.
And I would add to that, Luke, the importance of including people, no matter their abilities and disabilities, in the conversation, because I think they have an innate awareness of what's going around and what's being said. And it's so important for family to recognize that there is that genuine capacity to not only understand what's going on, but to be part of our own support network, that the
Of
people with
course.
disabilities can offer just as much compassion and empathy as anybody in our world.
Sounds good.
Okay, so moving on to our last question, and that is, if you could have a dream tonight of someone who has died, what would that dream look like to you? So what kind of dream would you want to have tonight if you could? So I'll first go to Luke. If you could have a dream of someone who has died today, what would you want that dream to be?
What dream could it be? Like,
Could be anything. Would you want both your grandfathers to be in the same dream? Would that be something that'd be interesting for you?
oh, I don't think I've ever told you this. Now that you mention it, I would like here's the difference though. My dad's father only preferred downhill, whereas my mom's dad liked cross country skiing. But you know what? I can have this dream of both of them at the same dream going downhill skiing and going for walks at the park.
I like that. That's awesome. Well, anything's possible in a dream. And so I hope you're able to get that dream tonight. You have to let me know if you do. But that would be awesome. Same question to you, Michael. If you could have a dream tonight of someone who has died, what would that dream look like?
My go-to would always be a dream where Tim and Gordon and I are together and just reliving in the dream world what it would have been like or what it could be like for the three of us to be spending time together.
I'm surprised, though. I'm really surprised and say I would have asked them about the Museum of Knowledge a little bit more to get
Yeah.
further understanding.
Museum of Knowledge, yeah.
Well,
Oh,
I
and then-
definitely want to put these two things together. What the Library of Information find out more, because people have mentioned it within the neurodiverse community, that phrasing has been brought up a lot of times by people who tap and type their communication, that exact wording. So I think that I would like to see more about how they're connected. And a reminder to myself that when Gordon said, "Take me to the Museum of Knowledge," there was no internet. There was no texting.
No texting. Oh my goodness.
So we
Wow.
would physically have had to go there.
That's so
Wow.
interesting.
Yeah. Whereas the library image is where in a different type of Ethernet can people connect and learn things.
So I want to thank you both for being on the podcast and just sharing a little bit about your own grief, your experiences with the dreams, and also just the amazing work you're doing with supporting people that are disenfranchised. Yes, Luke?
I want to say something else. I can also dream about my old school friend Eden, about playing some fun board games or playing like all different sports or outdoor games at recess time.
Would she still be 13, do you think? Or would she be your age now?
Yeah, well,
What do you think?
actually, she was 2.5 years younger than she's actually 2.5 years younger than I am. I'm almost 28, and if she was still alive, she'd be 25.
So would you see her as a 25-year-old, or do you think it would appear in your dream as a 13-year-old?
There've been times when it's appeared to me as like in her 20s, and most of the time as still a preteen teenager.
Oh, that's just pretty cool. And what's one board game you used to play?
Oh my goodness, we used to play a lot of different oh my goodness, like apples to apples and Scrabble, and oh my goodness, we played all different kinds. Oh, Connect Four, Connect Four, that's another one.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. So thank you again, Luke, for sharing, and then also Michael for being here too. Once again, great work and keep it up.
Thank you so much.